Japan's 600-year-old tsunami stones mark deadly flood zones, warning generations where not to build or risk death. Petroglyphs in Chaco Canyon warn of things we still can't quite explain, and an ancient sarcophagus in Lebanon may have the oldest tomb curse ever discovered. These are ancient civilizations that left foreboding warnings. In Japan, along the coastline, there are these things called tsunami stones. What are they exactly? Well, essentially, they're warnings or guides carved into the stone, some dating back more than 600 years. A lot of them were set up after the events of 1896, when an earthquake and 2 tsunamis killed around 22,000 people. The stones usually have a flat face with writing on them, sometimes listing death tolls, sometimes marking mass graves, and often giving advice on where homes should or should not be built. Some are as tall as 10 feet. And a lot of the older ones have weathered so much that the characters are hard to read now. One of the most famous examples is in the tiny village of Anayoshi. Its inscription says, "High dwellings are the peace and harmony of our descendants. Remember the calamity of the great tsunamis. Do not build any homes below this point." And people there listened. The village heeded that warning and built above the line, which actually saved them from disasters that came later. So the purpose behind these stones is summed up by Professor Fumihiko Imamura from Tohoku University, who explained that it only takes about 3 generations for people to kind of forget about disasters. Over time, memories fade, especially when modern solutions like seawalls make people feel safe. But Japan sits on the Ring of Fire, where about 18% of the world's earthquakes hit. Alright, let's talk about the Anasazi Petroglyphs, because these carvings get really weird once you start looking into the details. The Anasazi, or ancestral Puebloans, lived across the Four Corners area, Arizona, Utah, Colorado, and New Mexico, more than 1,000 years ago. They left behind cliff dwellings, pottery, and these massive rock carvings. One of the strangest sets of petroglyphs is at Chaco Canyon in New Mexico. There's this carving that shows what looks like a blazing star next to a crescent moon. Astronomers think it might be a record of the supernova that lit up the sky in 1054, the same one the Chinese wrote about. That's already kind of crazy, but it gets creepier. In other spots you find these spirals and figures that line up perfectly with the solstices and equinoxes, like they were documenting stuff going on in the sky as warnings for future generations. And then there are the more mysterious ones, carvings of beings with, big eyes, elongated limbs, figures that don't really look human at all. As for exactly what they are, we can't say for sure. The Anasazi vanished around the 1300s, leaving these cryptic messages behind. The Babylonians had a way of looking at the sky that was very different from how we see it today. For them, the night sky wasn't just stars and planets, it was full of messages from the gods. And one of the scariest signs you could possibly see was a lunar eclipse. To them, when the Earth's shadow swallowed the sun, it was a warning. And you can't really blame them. I mean, imagine seeing something like that and having no scientific explanation for what was going on. I mean, what are you supposed to think? Recently, though, researchers finally finished translating 4 4,000-year-old tablets that have been sitting in the British Museum since the 1800s. These tablets are the oldest documents of lunar eclipse omens from Babylonia. They list more than 60 different signs, each describing how the timing, the shadow's movement, or the duration of the eclipse could reveal what kind of disaster was about to happen. Here are some examples. If the eclipse is in the middle of the night, it means economic trouble. If it darkens all at once, a king will die. If it lasts until dawn, the whole world is in trouble. But it wasn't just doom and gloom for the sake of it. These omens gave priests and prophets the ability to recommend rituals or prayers to try and prevent the oncoming disaster. Basically, the gods sent a warning, but there was still a chance to do something about it. Down in central Turkey, there's a place called Bukluk Kale. Archaeologists have been digging there for over a decade, and in 2023 they pulled something out of the ground, a royal Hittite seal. The Hittites were one of the first big civilizations of the Bronze Age in West Asia. They might have come from somewhere beyond the Black Sea, eventually settling in what's now Turkey in the early 2000s BCE. Researchers translated the cuneiform writing, according to excavation head Professor Dr. Kumuyashi Matsumura. On the seal, the great king Taberna or Tavana writes, "Whoever breaks this will die." End quote. These seals were basically stamped onto contracts, and the message is about as clear and blunt as it gets. Break the deal and we'll just kill you. So the Hittite royals clearly took their agreements very seriously. In 1923, archaeologists digging in Byblos, Lebanon, came across the sarcophagus of King Ahiram. It's a massive stone coffin about 2.3 meters long, or about 7.5 feet, and it's covered in detailed carvings, as you can see. Along the edge of the lid was one of the oldest known Phoenician inscriptions, a warning that says, "If a king among kings, or a governor among governors, or a commander among commanders should attack Byblos and uncover this sarcophagus, may his scepter be broken, may the throne of his kingdom be overturned, and may peace flee from Byblos. And for him, may his inscription be effaced." Basically, Ahiram was saying if anyone dared mess with his resting place, they'd be cursed politically and spiritually in the afterlife. Scholars call this the earliest lengthy example of the Phoenician alphabet, so it's both a groundbreaking piece of language history and one of the oldest tomb curses we've ever seen. Next up, we have the hunger stones. So these are haunting rocks that appear in rivers across Europe whenever droughts hit. When the water drops low enough, the carvings show up, of course, warning anyone who sees them about the hard times ahead. One of the most famous stones is in the Czech Republic, which has words carved in 1616, translating to, "If you see me, weep." It's not just the words though, a lot of hunger stones are covered in dates, marking past droughts, 1417, 1616, 1707, so on. People hundreds of years ago would have seen these stones rise out of the river and known disaster was coming, sometimes hundreds of years before modern records or weather forecasts even existed. A temple warning inscription, also called the Soreg inscription, is basically one of the scariest keep out signs in history. It sat outside the sanctuary of the Second Temple in Jerusalem. It warned anyone who wasn't supposed to go further. If they crossed the line, they were risking their life. Two of these tablets have been found. The first, a complete one, was found in 1871 by Charles Simon Claremont Ganel. The Ottomans took it, and now it sits in the Istanbul Archaeology Museums. The second is a partial tablet discovered in 1936, which is now housed at the Israel Museum. Both tablets still show traces of the red paint that originally highlighted the letters. The text reads something like, "No stranger is to enter within the balustrade round the temple and enclosure. Whoever is caught will be himself responsible for his ensuing death." The inscription mentions the walls and barriers of the temple, so anyone reading it knew exactly where they weren't supposed to go, so that's helpful. Also seems like it's only men who are in trouble here. They don't mention women intruding. The Maya were one of the biggest civilizations in ancient America, building huge cities, temples, and farms. But around the year 900, a lot of their cities were suddenly abandoned. The people have always wondered why. Scientists studying the ruins and the land around them found what turns out to be a pretty clear warning: what happens when you push the environment too far. The Maya went through decades of drought, but at the same time they were also cutting down huge sections of rainforest. Without the trees, the soil dried out. The water ran off too quickly, and erosion ruined farmland, crops failed, food was scarce, and things just fell apart. Researchers say the Maya collapse is one of the best examples we have of how deforestation and water mismanagement can help bring down an entire civilization. Easter Island, or Rapa Nui, is famous for those giant stone heads known as the moai, but the real story of the island is kind of a warning carved into the land itself. When the first Polynesians settled there, they brought the Polynesian rat with them. Those little guys chewed through palm seeds before they could grow. On top of that, people were chopping down trees for farming and moving the big statues. They'd roll them on logs. Over time, the forest was wiped out. No trees meant no big canoes, which of course made fishing further out almost impossible, and the soil started washing away, making farming harder and harder. And for years, people thought this was the cause of the downfall, but newer research actually shows their population stayed pretty steady until Europeans showed up in the 1700s and brought disease and, slavery. But the issue with the land definitely didn't help things. The Georgia Guidestones were this huge, mysterious granite monument that stood in Elbert County, Georgia from 1980 until 2022, standing over 19 feet tall, made from 6 massive granite slabs weighing more than 237,000 pounds. It's often called the American Stonehenge. The monument was commissioned by a man using the name Robert C. Christian, who claimed he represented a small group of Americans worried about social, nuclear, and economic collapse. So the idea was to leave a guide for humanity in a world after catastrophe. Christian designed the stones to function as a compass, calendar, and clock with slots and holes aligned to track the sun and stars, marking solstices, equinoxes, and the North Star. The Guidestones had 10 inscriptions carved in 8 languages, laying out principles for humanity, stuff like keeping the population in balance with nature, keeping reproduction in check, and protecting the environment. There was also a small tablet explaining the stones and giving the location of a supposed time capsule. When the monument was dismantled after a 2022 bombing, they didn't find that capsule, unfortunately. From the start, there were conspiracies surrounding these Guidestones. Some thought they were satanic or that the Illuminati was involved. Others just saw them as, a rational guide for future generations. Over the years, they were vandalized multiple times, and finally, again in July of 2022, a bombing destroyed part of the monument. The county removed the remains for safety, and while there have been talks of rebuilding it, the future of the Guidestones is still uncertain. I've been your host, James, and I will catch you, yes, you specifically, in the next video.